as it turns out.
Impeach him, impeach him.
So we are here to consider the revised constitution of the graduate student government, which you all can see hopefully on your screens. So the way that we're going to handle this is we're going to go article by article and discuss any changes that people have that they want to talk about to amend the current slate of amendments. And then at the end, we will take one vote on whether or not to propose the document that we have created to a referendum by the graduate student body.
Point of information,
yes.
Alec Dennis, Business and Management. Will there be votes along the way if there's a suggested amendment to our amendments?
Yes. So any change to the current setup will be voted on. We're going to treat this as if it is a document that already exists, and we'll vote on any changes to the amendments.
Sounds good. Thank you.
So for logistical purposes, if you have a question or you have a comment, go ahead and use the hand raise option. If you are the correct person to answer a question, if you would use one of the other emoji choices that you have, so that we know that you are chiming in to answer the question, because otherwise you're going to get put at the back of the line, and that will help us keep organized who is answering and who is asking questions. So that's going to be our basic setup for how we run the meeting. We can go ahead and get started with Article 1, which is, let me pull it up here. The name, purpose, mission, and objectives. So anybody who has comments on the changes made in Article 1, go ahead and begin raising your hand. Laura McBride.
Laura McBride, chemistry. So are we doing all of Article 1, or are we just starting with 1.1?
So I think we'll take the articles all together as one article, so any part of it.
I noticed in 1.5, the statement of inclusion, veteran status, marital status, and disability are listed twice in the whole section on shall provide equitable access to an opportunity in its membership. So I think we can strike the second repeat of those, because I don't think we need to have those specific statuses listed twice. I think that just might be like some type of typo. I don't know if that needs to be an amendment though, or if that's something that we can just fix ours offline.
All right, so we have a proposed amendment to delete the second iteration of marital status, veteran status, and disability. This one, I think we'll just go with some unanimous consent. So do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, are there any objections? Seeing no objections, we will delete the typographical errors that were helpfully caught by Laura McBride. Any other comments or questions on Article 1? Yes, Viana?
Hi, art history and archaeology, Viana Newman Dennis, just also a super quick typo issue. I think it's in the very first, it's in the preamble actually. Towards the end of it, I think it still says in doing, and I believe we needed to say in so doing. Yep, right there. That's all. Thank you.
All right, do I hear a second?
Second.
Any objections? Seeing none, we will fix the second obvious typographical error helpfully caught by a member. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Emmanuel.
Yeah, so Article 1.42, 1.4, it should be B, sorry, 1.4B. So I had proposed that instead of just saying that and provide input regarding all other mandatory fees, to insert the word and international between mandatory so that it reads all other mandatory and international student fees, so that we can be at least inclusive and also capture international students.
Okay. Q, is that to weigh in on that point? Okay, then go ahead.
Yeah, I think the international fee is also a mandatory fee. But if that's only to like perhaps focus more, like you want to include international, then that's fine. But I just want to make sure that that's also a fee that every international student should pay.
Okay. So we have an amendment on the table to insert the words "and international student" after the word "mandatory." Do I hear a second?
Second.
Seconded. Are there any objections?
Yes.
All right, we have an objection from Yehuda. Yehuda, do you want to talk about your objection, and then we'll hold an actual vote?
So I'm not sure if we want to start enumerating every fee. One of the concerns, my understanding is about this review, was the number of places where the Constitution is very specific and people felt unnecessarily specific. So, you know, if we advise on mandatory fees are mandatory fees, which could change at any time. And we don't want to have to go through this over and over and over again.
Okay, any other comments on the adding international student fees? Laura McBride.
Laura McBride, chemistry. I agree with Yehuda's point. I think since it is a mandatory fee, it's included in all other mandatory fees. We don't need to specifically add it. The other thing is this isn't going to go up for review for another 5 years, and maybe the international student fee will be gone at that point. So hopefully that'd be great. And so I don't think we need to explicitly spell it out.
Okay, I just want to point out that you are correct that it won't come up for review in the next 5 years, but I meant to say at the beginning that this is not your only opportunity to amend the Constitution. If at the end of this you still think that there are problems with it, you can amend the Constitution at any time by just submitting an amendment to the GSG body, and then there's the whole process that we go through. But not that you're wrong, Laura, that made me remember a thing that I meant to say earlier. Alec?
Sure. One other thing real quick. One reason why this is actually something that we debated including in there. And one concern is we are not currently on that position to provide input for mandatory student fees. And it just struck us as a little bit weird to say in our Constitution, we shall provide input on the international student fee when we can't unless they let us. And I mean, I definitely get the point of wanting to throw a stake in the ground specifically, because I feel like that's something that we should have input into. But on the whole, I agree with Yehuda's and Laura's comments that I think it's best if we just be non-specific and we can point to this if it comes up again.
All right, last chance for comment on this proposed amendment. All right, then we're going to hold our first official vote since unanimous consent did not receive unanimous consent. So if you approve of the amendment to add and international student after the word mandatory in 1.4b, go ahead and use the yes option on your Zoom page. If you do not agree, then go ahead and use the no option. If you can't find the yes or no options, you click on the participants tab. It's the same place you would raise your hand just their different options. So we'll give about a minute to vote. All right, any more votes incoming? Last chance. No. All right. So by a vote of 20-9, the motion is defeated. I'm going to go ahead and clear all your votes. Any other points to make on Article 1? Going once, going twice. All right, let's move on to Article 2, membership. And I will open the floor to comments on Article 2. Mr. Yehuda Katz.
So I understand the purpose of the changes here seems to be to make it easier to understand who the voting members are. So the question is, if we're, when we have every grad student as a member, then we can claim to be the organization with the most members, and we can, when it comes to university tools talking about organizations, we can let people into things like TerpLink and, when we talk about, how GSG is different than other student organizations and when dealing with STAMP. And it seems like the definition of members is important to that, as distinct from executives and from elected representatives who are like other classes of member.
Okay, so your suggestion would be then to strike the redefinition in 2.1.
And the other places where it appears, including at the end where we talk about amending. I mean, we could use the terms differently, but when we say all graduate students are members of the graduate student government, that seems to be an important part of making the organization work from a more global perspective.
Okay. Kay, Sarah, is this a comment on this issue?
Yeah, I guess I'm not, either I don't understand what Yehuda's saying, or I don't know how to read. So do you want me to go ahead, or do you want me to wait?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
So the way I read it in 2.1 is that all graduate students are members of the graduate student body, and you're eligible to be a member of GSG, but that doesn't make you a member of GSG. That's what that means, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess I don't quite understand, Yehuda, why all graduate students should also be members of GSG, because then it gets even more to me, it sounds like that gets more convoluted, where everyone's a member of GSG, but then there's specific roles and some vote and some don't. Mm-hmm. So I guess for me, I kind of like the wording the way it is to make it clear that you're eligible to become a member of GSG, but just because you're a graduate student doesn't mean you're part of the governing body. But maybe it's worth having something like, as a member of the graduate student body, you're represented by the GSG or something like that.
So
Yehuda, let me
Ashley, can you show the original text?
If I can speak, since I was part of the group that rewrote this particular clause.
Yeah, let's have Alec go.
The original text was all graduate students are members of the graduate student government, I believe was the original text.
Yes.
And so one of the things is there is some confusion, and this shows up a lot of places in both the Constitution and the bylaws, where they say members can do X. The problem is in those places, more notably in the bylaws, it's clear that it meant that it was assembly members, but yet because of this language, it was very ambiguous. And so it's one of those things where we thought it would be helpful to have this clarification that, you know, you're part of the graduate student body, you are more than welcome to become a member of the graduate student government, but to me personally at least, it didn't make as much sense to say that every graduate student is a member of graduate student government, kind of like how, you know, I'm not a member of the US government, but I am represented by the US government.
That's exactly how I understood it. So thank you, Alec.
Any other?
So it's sorry, it's only a question of semantics maybe in dealing with the university, because if obviously we're a special case when it comes to student groups, but every other student group has an election of its members. Every other student group has some count of the number of members, which when it comes to statistics is how they're viewed by the Student Organization Resource Center. And every other student group, for example, has a portal on TerpLink, which their members have access to certain things like event registration. And if we wanted to do event registration and have our members not necessarily be elected GSG representatives, then we couldn't necessarily let them into our TerpLink, just as an example.
Any other comments on the proposed change, graduates to not redefine members to elected representatives? Viana.
Yeah, with art history and archaeology, Viana Newman Dennis, would there be a compelling reason to have somebody who is not currently a GSG representative have access to whatever is on TerpLink? It seems like this change has been suggested because it just clarifies things. It doesn't really change how things are operating now. It just makes graduate student as a graduate student versus GSG representative. It just makes that distinction more clear. So I'm not sure I see a compelling reason to change this back to the way it was.
Laura McBride.
Laura McBride, chemistry. I think I see the point Yehuda is trying to make. And I guess kind of my question is, if we go ahead and change the Constitution so now only the representatives are members of the grad student body, does that affect us in any way? Our standing with the university, the resources we can use at the university, because we'd be dropping from like 10,000 members to, I don't know how many voting members we have. Let's say it's 60. Like, how would that affect us? Or, because I don't know if this is just a semantics change. And I think that's what Yehuda was referring to. And so I'd like some more clarification if it is just a semantics change or if there's these other ramifications if we make this change.
Let's go with Alec first.
To me, at least, independent of anything on TerpLink, I mean, we're still the graduate student government. I don't think there's that SORC is suddenly going to treat us differently because we say, well, technically we used to have 10,000 members and now we just have 60 because we're only counting the assembly members. I don't think that that's really something that we need to be concerned about. And so that was why, to me, this was just something in order to try to make things clearer throughout everything else, so that we wouldn't have this question of if a graduate student happened to show up to our meeting, they would technically, as a member, there's some ambiguous one, I think, about them being able to vote on things. Because in the bylaws, it says something about members being able to vote. And so there's just, enough other places that I personally feel like it's simpler if we just clarify it here. And also speaking to other graduate student governments constitutions, there are a lot of other graduate student governments that have the language that we have here, that we're proposing here. It's not.
So when it comes to the other places in the bylaws, though, we could just as easily update all of those.
There's a lot more places in the bylaws, though, and to me, it also just doesn't make sense to say somebody who never shows up to a single meeting, who never attends a graduate student government event, who might not even vote for in any graduate student government election or anything like that, to be a member of our organization. That's not really an honest member if they're not doing anything.
Our fearless leader, Annie Rappaport.
Hi. I really appreciate where the membership Article 2 group was coming from. It wasn't a group that I was personally a part of, but I thought it really added some clarity that I don't think harms anything. It remains unclear to me. I have never sat in a SORC or TERP link training where they said that it wasn't in our discretion. That we can always pick who has access to certain things. In fact, because we serve the entire graduate student body, we make many of those things available to people upon request or freely upon our website, or for example, this is being streamed on YouTube. So some of those concerns I just wanted to voice and say I don't view them as super concerning. And I view it kind of, as Alec was just saying, as more honest, because there's still several graduate students, though we've fought very hard to change this, that don't even know what GSG is. So I don't know how honest it is to tell people that they are a member of something when they don't even know what that something is. And maybe having this delineation adds that clarity. That was it. That was my only addition.
All right. So we have a proposed change to delete the redefinition of members. Do I have a second? Oh, wait, Emmanuel wants to weigh in. Unless not anymore. Emmanuel.
Okay, Emmanuel from International Education Policy. So I was thinking that the point that Yehuda is raising has been entirely covered in our mission statement. For instance, can we scroll to the mission statement, please? No, the mission, okay, yep, there. So because I see the mission reading that the mission of the graduate student government shall be to represent University of Maryland College Park graduate students' interest. And I think that one incorporates all graduate students at that point. That was just my input.
Okay, any last comment on this proposed change?
Sorry, and I had one more thing. This original constitution was based on the constitution of the SGA, which has been around for longer than we have. And this basically was copied out of their constitution originally.
So there is a proposed change on the table. Do I have a second? Seeing none, I guess we will move on. Any other thoughts on Article 2 membership? Laura McBride.
Laura McBride, chemistry. I just had a question on Article 2.4, where it says all members of the graduate student body shall be entitled to vote in general and special general elections of the GSG. Is that supposed to be special general, or would that just be special?
Yes, that is supposed to be special general, because one thing that we were trying to clarify is election. So an example of a special general election would be the upcoming vote on the constitutional review. Because that's not our regular general election, it's a special general election. And then when we later on say something is a special election with no general included, that would be like filling a VPLA post that has been vacant. And that's just something that assembly members would get to vote on. So yes, that is a deliberate word choice.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Yehuda Katz?
I would motion to put a hyphen between special and general then to make it clear that it's not a typo. Or perhaps a parenthetical comment afterward or footnote explaining what it is.
Okay.
I'm okay with either one. Which one would you recommend, Yehuda?
Not being able to see the future, a hyphen is simpler, and I still am not sure people are going to understand it.
Okay, we'll go with the hyphen then.
All right,
Plus
we have a motion to hyphenate special general. Do I hear a second?
I second.
It has been seconded. Any objection? Excellent. Then we will hyphenate special general in order to make it clear. Any last comments on Article 2 membership? Seeing none, we will move to Article 3 Executive Committee. Any questions or comments on Article 3? Yehuda Katz.
So I see where, so we're taking out in 3.2b, we're taking out with notice to the assembly and changing that to through processes outlined in the bylaws. And I think it's just sufficient to take out notice to the assembly because everything in the Constitution is through some process outlined in the bylaws.
Okay. Any comments on the motion to remove through process outlined in the bylaws? If not, then I'll ask for a second.
Where are all the people who always just jump up and second everything?
Well, sometimes that's
it.
me.
I'll second it.
All right. Do we have any objection?
I guess I have a point of information.
Yes.
Laura McBride Chemistry. I think the through processes outlined in the bylaws occurs multiple times in the Constitution. I think I remember seeing it like farther below. So I guess kind of a question I have for Yehuda before we vote on this one, are you planning to take them all out in the Constitution or just this specific one?
Just as a comment, that exact phrase occurs only once in the revised Constitution. I just Control F to the document, but it could be slightly changed words. So
yeah,
right. Well, so the only place where you would probably usually have it is things like what's 3.2e. Other responsibilities may be provided in the bylaws, and that would be an appropriate use. But otherwise, because otherwise the executive could claim that their responsibilities are exclusionary to all other responsibilities. But other than that, everything that is a procedure is defined somehow in the bylaws.
Q?
Yeah, I actually want to say the thing that Yehuda just said, and I think it also makes sense. I think it also makes sense to have it still here, because if the person can just recommend without any, I think if we pull out the bylaws part, it seems like the person can recommend without any process, and And this just can add at least, and emphasize that the processes in bylaws are needed for the person to recommend.
Hey, Simon, this is Rachel.
Yes, Rachel.
Apparently I can't, I'm sorry, I can't raise my hand because I'm listed
you're
as a co-host.
Co-host, yeah.
Sorry. I just wanted to add I think the background intent here of removing with notice to the assembly was to provide more flexibility to the president to be able to make those appointments, because the process of giving notice has seemed to be kind of belabored sometimes during different assembly sessions. And so I think that part of that was to remove that extra layer of burden, and then we could still have some other process outlined, in more detail in the bylaws as appropriate. But I think if I'm remembering right, that's just one reason why we wanted to get rid of explicitly that with notice to the assembly. Maybe Annie can affirm or clarify.
Rachel's right.
I don't think anyone was saying that we should change that and keep the with notice to assembly. Although I can tell you again, because I was here when that was added to the Constitution, that was put in after the president appointed people to committees and didn't tell anyone outside the committees that the people were appointed. So if you had concerns about something the committee was doing, you couldn't actually go to them. So that's why it was added. And it's definitely, now we've seen how it works and now it makes sense to change it. The question is just, is it necessary to say that there has to be a process outlined in the bylaws?
Okay, Sarah.
My note is not related to the present topic.
Okay. So clearly there has been some debate and therefore a heard objection, which means we will vote on the proposed removal of through processes outlined in the bylaws. We will.
One quick point of information. If you wish to officially abstain, should you just not vote yay or nay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I will set a timer this time so I know when a minute is up. We'll give you a minute to vote. Yes means remove the phrase through processes outlined in the bylaws. No means keep the phrase in. All right, that is 1 minute with 4 in favor and 19 against. The motion is defeated. A quick point of clarification, can people on the phone use the voting option? I've never used Zoom on the phone before.
No, if they're using it in the app, they can.
Okay.
And
if
there is a way to raise hands on the phone, but I don't think you can use the other options.
Okay. So if anyone on the phone would like to vote, just go ahead and unmute yourself, say that you would like to vote and tell me what your vote is, and I will make sure that you are included in the vote counts. Because I just realized that might be a problem. Okay.
So for people on the phone to raise their hand, it's *9.
*9. Says our intrepid parliamentarian. Any other thoughts on Article 3? Oh, we have several. Let's begin with Kay Sarah.
Hey, Kay Sarah, MLIS. Where was it? 3.2.c, there's a slight typo. There's an omission of a comma. It should say sign or veto, comma, within 10 university working days, comma, all legislation passed by the assembly, or the clause about the 10 university days should be moved to the end of the sentence to make it grammatically correct.
Excellent. We have a motion to add a comma because some people have read this very closely, and thank you for doing so. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any objection? Seeing none, we will add the comma.
Thank you.
Next up is someone on the phone, 410 area code, or maybe 141 area code. Someone on the phone who has raised their hand.
*6 to unmute.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Right. Simon, this is Tyler, the transcriptionist. I just had a question. Can you give me the total number of participants just so I can calculate your those who obtained?
Yes, we have 57 participants, but not all of them are voting members.
How many are voting members? Do you guys know?
Let's have, can I have somebody count the actual voting members and let our transcriptionist know?
I'll count.
Thank you, Annie.
Thank you, Annie.
I'd like to propose that people who are abstaining actually use a different symbol, just not yes or no, and that way we can count them.
Let's do the away symbol, which is this little clock if you click on more, or any symbol besides yes or no if you wish to abstain. And if you're on the phone, we'll just assume you're abstaining unless you vote. Okay, Laura McBride.
Laura McBride, chemistry. I have 3 like typo grammatical things in section 3.5.1. On the first line, the election of vice president shall take place, get rid of in. So just read shall take place at the end of the spring term. So striking in. On the fourth line, where it says all voting representatives from the term ending will be eligible to vote in the vice presidents, I would put election after that, because that's, I believe, what it's saying, that we'd vote in the vice president election. And then on the 8th line, candidates is spelled wrong. So following nominations, it says candidates, so just change that to the correct spelling of candidates. So those are my 3. I don't know if we had to vote on them separately, but those are the 3 things I would propose to change.
All right, we have a motion to correct some typographical errors in 3.5.a. Do I hear a second?
Seconded.
Any objections?
I would also, I think I see one on the screen I'd like to add. There needs to be a space between vice presidents and shall.
Your objection is so noted.
Once the track changes are accepted, all those things can be fixed without amendments.
I have a comment.
Okay, I don't know who said that, but
sorry, Viana Newman Dennis,
Viana,
art history and archaeology. I'm in agreement with everything except I understood eligible to vote in the vice president's vote in as like a verb. And so I don't think there's a need for the word election after vice presidents, but whatever we think is the clearest.
that is a fair read. Does anyone who worked on this particular section have a particular feeling about either one? All right.
I don't have a strong feeling, but I was just going to say that we have 43 voting program reps in attendance. Tyler.
Excellent. Rachel Lamb.
Yeah, sorry. I'm using my coffee cup as my hand here. I think the original intent, I believe, was that they will, yeah, I guess actually the meaning is probably the same, right? Because they'll either be eligible to elect them. So instead of to vote in, you could say elect. They'll be eligible to elect them, or to like physically sit there and vote them in. So if it perhaps is more clear to change to elect or to vote to elect the, if I'm reading that full right, we could do that.
I would second that.
Yeah, can I amend my amend?
Sure.
I'd like to do what Rachel said, so to get rid of vote in and just change that to be elect.
Okay. Emmanuel?
So also Article 3.5, I would like an article to be added between held and executive office, the second line, so that the statement reads, no person shall be elected to the same executive office for more than 4 times, and no person who has held an executive office for more than.
Okay. So let's break these all down a little bit. Let's start with the eligible to vote in the vice presidents. So we have a motion to change the words vote in to elect. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any objections? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and change that. We have a motion to spell the word candidates correctly. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Any objection?
I object on moral grounds. No, sorry, that was a joke.
Hearing none, we will spell the word candidates correctly. And then you had one more, Laura.
Yeah, it was in the first line, get rid of in after place.
Yes, and we have a motion to remove the word in 3.5.a. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any objection? Hearing none, we'll remove the word in. Then we have a motion to add the word an to 3.5.b so that it says who has held an elective office, an executive office. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any objections?
Yes, because this article is referring specifically to held a specific executive position, so you can't run, no person shall be elected to the same executive office. So by putting "and," you're generalizing it more.
Ah, I see your point. So if we add the "and," it means someone who has been vice president could not be elected to the presidency.
No, I think you have to you read further and it's clear that it doesn't mean that. Meaning an executive office who has held an executive office for more than 1 semester of a term to which some other person was elected.
Shall be elected to that same office more than thrice. I love the use of the word thrice. Amazing. Okay, but we have an objection. So we'll go ahead. Any other comments on including the word "and" for or against? Okay. So the vote is then to add no person who has, sorry, they asked me to type it. So I'm going to do that real quick. So yes is to add the word "and" to no person who has held an executive office. No is to not add the word "and." I just typed that privately to Annie. That's not going to help anybody. So we'll go ahead and take 30 seconds to vote on this question. No.
Sorry, Simon. This is Kay Sarah, MLAS. Could you either put in the chat or repeat one more time?
Yep,
Which is which?
I've typed it 3 times to Annie now. It is now in the chat.
And now we know you're sending secret messages to Annie.
I did ask her a couple of questions. That's true. Although everyone should know that secret messages on Zoom do not remain secret. They are sent to the host at the end of the meeting. All right. With time expired, we have 17 in favor, 7 against, 1 officially abstaining, and anyone else accidentally abstaining. So we will add the and. Any other objections, questions, amendments to Article 3? Going once, going twice. Sold. Article 4, the Assembly. Any amendments suggested here? Laura McBride.
Laura McBride, chemistry. So 4.1.1.3. Oh, but I think you have them labeled differently. Huh.
4.1.A.3.
Maybe. Yes. In the first, I guess, half sentence that's been added, per is twice. So it says with minimum representation of 1 representative per non-dual graduate degree program. So I think per and program are repeated twice, and I don't think they need to be. So my amendment would be to strike one of the pers and one of the programs.
All right, we have an amendment to correct another duplication of words. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any objection? Hearing none, we will strike the per and the program that are redundant. Mr. Yehuda Katz.
So when we talked about, I see, this does not match the copy that was previously emailed to the Assembly for review. So 4.1A2, this limit will take effect commencing with the 2020-2021 general elections. Is not in the, well, that's not in the version that was sent out, but I'd like to change it anyway. To say this limit will not include terms before the time at which the amendment takes effect.
Okay.
May I just want to chime in on one thing. I was not directly responsible for writing this, but based off of our discussions, I 100% agree with what Yehuda is saying. That was the intent of this measure, was to not include any years prior to that. And so I think that was just perhaps a slight typographic error because we did not want that to be included. So good catch, Yehuda.
Yes. So Yehuda, do you want to give us what you think the final wording should be? Let's have a very clear wording before we vote. Or anyone else who has ideas about wording, feel free to raise your hand.
And maybe put it in the chat so people can read it.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm typing now. Which is this now? We're in the 39th Assembly, right?
You would know better than anyone else, Yehuda.
I don't have access to any of my files anymore, so actually. Let me see. I mean, it's at the top of every piece of legislation, GSGA, whatever number it is.
And he says, yes, it is the 39th.
Okay. There we go. I've put it in the chat.
This limit will not include terms before the 40th assembly. Happy anniversary, GSG. Excellent. So the motion on the table is to replace the phrase, this limit will take effect commencing with the 2020-2021 general elections.
That phrase was not in the version sent to the assembly, so I would just say take it out. But the motion is to add, this limit will not include terms before the 40th assembly.
Sure. So do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, this seems like a substantial enough change that we're gonna hold a vote on it. So yes is to accept Yehuda's change, and no is to reject Yehuda's
Simon, could you
language.
just repeat exactly what the change is? So I think it's deleting what's on the screen and adding the sentence.
Right, so remove this limit will take effect commencing with the 2020-2021 general elections and replace it with this limit will not include terms before the 40th assembly.
Point of interest.
Mm-hmm.
Viana Newman Dennis, art history and archaeology. I don't know if we have to vote on this separately, but if I would like to suggest keeping what we have and adding what Yehuda has suggested, would that have to be a separate vote?
What's showing on the screen was not included in the version that was sent to the assembly for review. And as parliamentarian, I'm saying that it's not there.
I actually have
So
it in the version that I received.
I'm looking at the copy that was sent today by Annie at 2:20 p.m. and also 5 days ago by Ashley. That's the copy I'm looking at.
Okay, I believe I'm looking at the one from a few days ago.
Yeah, I don't see it in mine either, and I'm looking at the one that I think
it was an attempt to be clear and to actually do exactly what Yehuda is saying, but it's been a long haul, y'all. I've been staring at this thing a long time, so it's my bad. A member of the Constitution Committee rightfully brought up that we needed to add a clause. The intent of the clause was for it to apply for the future. I did make that change, and it should have been the right copy, but it didn't get to you all. So in an effort to save time, do whatever it is that saves time to get whatever it is you all want on here.
So what we will do, since there are constitutional issues with when you have to suggest a change to the entire assembly, we'll pretend that line is not there right now. So the first vote is on whether or not to add the language that Yehuda put forward. This limit will not include terms before the 40th assembly. Then if people would like to add back, this limit will take effect commencing with the 2020-2021 general elections. We will hold a second vote on that. Okay, everybody understand that? Any points of information about how that's going to function? Okay, so the first vote is to add to 4.1.A.2 the phrase, this limit will not include terms before the 40th assembly. So yes is to include that phrase, no is to not include that phrase. I will leave a minute to vote. With time expiring, the vote stands as 26 yeses, 1 no. The motion is adopted. A second motion has been made to also include the phrase, "This limit will take effect commencing with the 2020-2021 general elections," after what we just voted in from Yehuda. Viana, do you have a comment on that?
Yes, I was originally hoping for extra clarity, and so I was suggesting including both, but I suppose since this constitution is taking effect as soon as it's voted in, including next year, I guess the version of just saying not counting any terms before the 48th Assembly is clear enough. It implies that. So I withdraw the motion.
We have a withdrawn motion. Unless anyone else would like to make the same motion. Or has other motions relating to Article 4, the Assembly. Mr. Yehuda Katz. Yehuda, you are muted.
Over there. I wanted to talk about 41A3. Whatever is going on here. I want to talk about 41A3, talking about dual degree programs. And my understanding is that the purpose of the mentioning dual degree programs was either to exclude combined bachelor's master's programs or to make sure that all grad students are only counted once. And I was wondering if the committee could talk about that and if we can better define dual degree programs.
Yehuda, I worked on that clause. This is Jeremy Schmidt from the School for Public Policy. The intent was it was the latter, to not double count students for which there are programs that award to different types of degree. It wasn't specific. It was not about the bachelor master's type dual degree.
So would it be clearer to say that any individual graduate student can only count once?
I'll take that as a motion to add that to the 4.1.8.3, Mr. Katz.
Just a second. I'm reading it again. Each program shall be entitled to one representative for each 100 of its graduate students or part thereof, with minimum representation of one representative per program. Period. Any individual graduate student may only be counted in one program. Would that, so that would be my amendment, assuming that fits with the intent.
Okay, let's check on that intent with the Vice President of Graduate Affairs, Rachel Lamb, not of Graduate Affairs. That would be ridiculous.
The government's not working right now anyway. I was just thinking, Yehuda, even if you're the bachelor, even if you're in the bachelor's dual degree program, like Maddie, our chief of staff, she kind of rolled into the 5-year master's. She is being counted in the one master's program she's a part of, which is the School of Public Policy. So in that sense, everyone else, by just saying per non-dual graduate degree program, they will show up at least once somewhere. I guess I don't think it will affect, I know you're saying a couple things here, but I don't think it will affect have any malinterpretation with the 5-year master's with the bachelor.
Right. I think what I'm talking about, for example, is I think in business, where sometimes we count all of business as one. I'm not picking on business for any specific reason, but sometimes we count business as one big program. And then sometimes we look at individual programs and, depending on what data source you use, I think what would be clarifying here is even though you show up twice, either business gets a representative because you're there or, whatever your individual program is can have a representative. But if you count for business, then you don't count for specific program to give them a seat.
So the motion would be to delete non-dual graduate, or I guess just non-dual.
No, well, each program is at the beginning, so we would really define it at the very beginning. But I think it's understood. Each program shall be entitled to one representative for each 100 of its graduate students or part thereof, with minimum representation of one representative per program. Period. A single graduate student may only be counted as a member of one program.
Okay, do you want to type that into the chat so that we have the exact wording that we're voting on, please, Yehuda? And then Rachel, is that another comment? Okay.
Yeah, it's just another comment while you're typing. I'm just thinking, like, it for all in practice, just thinking about practical implementation for a second. So like we got our list from the graduate school that had every single program code and how many students were there part of that program code. And so if there was a dual degree program with the number of students listed next to that, we are saying here that that specific line item doesn't get representation. But if we change the wording to say a single graduate student may only be counted as a member of a single program, are you thinking that, like, how would you actually handle that? Instead of just excluding the line, are you trying to like divide that dual degree group of persons into like two different groups again?
Well, let me say that better data is available if we ask properly. So I don't know how practically you would implement it, but, and I guess if you have a better way of phrasing it, the concern I have with the way it's worded now is it's not clear whether someone's being excluded from representation or if we're trying to exclude dual representation.
Point of information.
Which is what we should be doing.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, I guess we need to kind of decide how we want to move forward. Because, for example, I represent the MLIS program. And within my program, there are dual degree students who are getting a degree, the MLIS degree, but who are also getting a master's in history. And their program is called HILLS. And so they do a 3-year program so that they get the MLIS degree that I'm representing and the history degree. As far as I know, I represent the HILLS students. I don't know, but I guess they're also represented by a history representative. I don't really know how that goes. They obviously, the dual degree students obviously get my emails when I send them to the MLIS listserv. But yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, so in the case of my department, these people are getting like split because we don't have a separate representative that covers the specific dual degree of MLIS and Master's in History.
Right, so if we change this and then this dual degree program wanted to petition to have a separate representative, then potentially they could do that, assuming we have accurate numbers, but they would be removed from the count for the other program. That would be the potential difference.
Who's maintaining that data though? Because I mean, that sounds like it then becomes incumbent on GSG to maintain different statistics than the university administration if we're going to be counting degrees differently.
Well, it seems like we're not sure exactly how the data comes in right now. As you mentioned, for your program, are those people included in the count for history? So
yeah, I have no idea.
So I don't think we lose anything with my change. It gives us the flexibility should that data be available to make those kinds of decisions.
Okay.
Jeremy?
Sorry, I'm on mute. Basically, yeah, the point is not to have is if like there's a dual, the intent of the clause was exactly as Yehuda was saying. It's if there's like a history English double degree, history would be represented, English would be represented, but that intersection would not have its own separate representative. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that. And also my hand was still raised, so I'm putting it down now.
Excellent. Rachel, is that?
Just one last thing, just to the point, when we asked for better data from the graduate school, because I wasn't on the subgroup sort of dealing with this question, but I know that one of the pieces of data that we wanted was how many graduate programs are there and how many people are actually included in these programs, to just better understand sort of if this 100 members per program was reasonable and how many programs are we talking about. So when the graduate school gave us the most recent data, it's a giant spreadsheet and it has a lot of rows, a lot of different programs. And so, for example, like all of the different sub programs, like in the business school, which has quite a few, like they're all listed and they have numbers next to them. So it was using that data as a reference to figure out like which one of these do we want to make sure are included, and then which one of these do we want to make sure don't get double included. So just to say that in that spreadsheet, the way the graduate school delivers it to us, all of the joint or dual degree programs are listed as their own separate line item. So I think just so people can get a sense of how the data is coming to us, if we asked a grad school for an updated list, that's how they're going to send it to us. And then you could just, using that list, decide, like, okay, here's all these programs that are eligible, and then here's the ones that we don't need to count. And I think, I forget, maybe somebody from the review committee remembers exactly the number, but it was like, if everyone who wanted a representative got one per 100 students that they had, it would be a very large assembly anyway.
Annie?
Hello, I'm going to turn away from you all so I can see the doc. This is just a general question, but if people want the data that we pull, it comes both from reports.umd.edu, but we specifically got it from the grad school. And just as a point of information, this was a really big discussion topic for us all. And when we asked Dean Fetter for a specific question, this sub-article group asked was, are program codes the same as what people are like? Well, people know their own program codes. That might sound silly, but some people didn't. We've had this happen in every single election I've been a part of. People don't know their actual program code. So just so you're aware, we don't know the perfect system, but even the data set, the spreadsheet, which I can go ahead, I'll send it to all of Assembly. You'll see just because somebody is PLCY in Testudo, they may not be PLCY according to the spreadsheet. They might be MAPP, MAPO, or POSI. That was just one example from Dean Fetter. So it's not a perfect thing because we are really decentralized and different colleges treat it differently. So just so people are clear, but also just to be transparent, I'll go ahead and send this report to everybody.
Laura McBride.
Laura McBride, chemistry. I think it was Jeremy who said that the point was that non-dual, or the point was that dual graduate programs are not represented. So I don't agree with Yehuda's point to strike that clause, because I think we need to make it specific that it's only for non-dual graduate degree programs that get a representative. And then I think we could add another sentence saying something like, all graduate students will only be count once, or something like that. So I think it kind of combines the point, but I do think we need that specificity. Another point that's unrelated, and it might be for Annie or whoever's in charge of elections. How do we know, like, when we're going to start the elections, how many representatives each program gets? Like, I'm just wondering, I think in chemistry, we have more than 100, but I'm the only chemistry rep. And I feel like when people like say they're interested in GSG, they think they're running against me. And I was like, no, I think we have one more spot. So I don't know how that information is going to be disseminated to assembly members and people interested in running for election. So that's just a whole separate point that I think we also need to address.
Right. So we have a poll drafted to send to all of the current representatives to ask about their interest and engagement for the following year, so that we can know who is, oh, sorry, this is Nate Woodard, Vice President for Community Development. Right, so that we can know who is planning to come back and who is not, and how many seats we have open. And then once we have identified which programs do have openings, typically we reach out, and this year we will be reaching out to department heads or program heads to circulate to their students. And then students will be able to nominate themselves if there are openings for their program.
Okay. So given Laura's comment, I think we're going to do this vote in two parts unless anyone else has any comments or questions that they would like to raise about the wording of this particular clause. Anybody? Okay, so we're going to hold one vote on the deletion of non-dual graduate degree, that phrase. And then we will hold one vote on the addition of a single graduate student may only be counted as a member of a single program. So anybody questions about that? Rachel is helpfully putting exactly what we're voting on in the chat. So we're going to start with the first one.
Well, we didn't exactly, I'm not sure what we gain by separating it, I think. Like I don't think we made it clear what we're getting out of keeping non-dual degree program. Is that,
so,
are we including more people or are we excluding more people by having that or removing it?
So that's Laura's suggestion. Okay, Rachel, go ahead.
I guess my response to that, Yehuda, would be, I think keeping it in just make sure that people are not double counted, because if they're in a dual degree program, they will be represented, like Kay Sarah's example, they will be represented in a sense by, they're going to get communications from two different programs, but their specific program will not get additional representation. So what this is saying is each of their individual programs will have representation. So they will be covered. They're not excluded, but they don't get like triple the amount of representation because they don't have a separate rep at the table for their explicit dual degree program. That's my interpretation of it. So it doesn't exclude anyone. It just prevents like extra representation extended to dual degree programs.
So my understanding of the sort of situation is that, like, if you're in two programs, you have dual degrees in two different programs that are both like 50 people, right? You get representation there, and then if you wanted to just be your own representative, right, you could theoretically do that. Hence, that word represent where you're one in that, or there are that crossover, because otherwise, even if we're not counting those people in the other one, they're still getting one out of, you know, history and one out of English, and then they're getting one in history and English.
Right. So putting that all together, I think it's important to look at both of these, you know, at this amendment all together, because if we just take out per non-dual degree program, we've suddenly given people extra representation over other people. But if we put it in together, if we take that out together with adding every person only counts once, then it's clear that we're not trying to have dual representation for people.
I think they're sort of two separate questions, because one is about how we count the number of people in a program, which is important, but one is about which programs are eligible for counting.
Okay, so can we vote on the other one first?
Sure. unless anyone has an objection to voting on Yehuda's addition first. Hearing none. All right. Oh,
Point of information, Simon.
yes.
Can you just re-explain what Yehuda's addition is and like where that would go in this?
Yes. So after the word program in 4.1.A.3, we would add the phrase, a single graduate student may only be counted as a member of a single program. Okay, which is in the chat, and Rachel is making clear which is yes and which is no. Yes will be adding the words, a single graduate student may only be counted as a member of a single program. No will be do not add those words. Are there any other questions about this particular vote?
Simon, I have another one. Laura McCard, chemistry. I feel like how that's phrased, a single graduate student may only be counted as a member of a single program, now conflicts with the example Kay Sarah made, because they'll be represented by history and by her program.
So they may be
I'm a little confused about by the wording there.
They may end up being represented by both, but they'll only be counted towards the number of representatives actually given once.
Okay,
right?
I think I understand it now.
So this is electoral college math type stuff about how many people count in that particular program. So they'll end up sort of accidentally being represented multiple times, but they won't get to be counted in both. Any other questions about that, the addition of that phrase? Vienna.
Yes, so the version of things that you just phrased, that's out as it stands now, correct? Or you're saying that's if we add in the suggestion that Yehuda's making?
That would be clarified if we add in Yehuda's suggestion.
Okay. So students would still have that representation, if you will, for each degree, right? Because there are different considerations for different degrees. Okay,
right.
Got it. Thank you.
Right.
I mean, anyone's welcome to talk to any elected representative they want. The question is, how many seats does each program have?
Right. Okay. Any other questions? All right, so the first vote is on the addition of a single graduate student may only be counted as a member of a single graduate program. Vote yes if you think that should be added. Vote no if you think it should not. Your minute to vote begins now.
Vote coffee mug if you, or clock if you're abstaining.
Yes. With time expired to vote, the votes are 21 yes, 2 no, 1 abstention. The motion carries, and we will add that sentence after the word program. A second vote now on the deletion of the phrase non-dual graduate degree, which is an attempt to clarify which programs are eligible for representation. Do we have a second on that deletion? We haven't technically. Anybody want to second it?
I'll second.
All right, we have a second. So it is the deletion of the phrase non-dual graduate degree program, which would, yes, change the phrase to representative per program as opposed to representative per non-dual graduate degree program. So vote yes if you are in favor of the deletion, no if you are not in favor of deleting that phrase. and coffee mug / clock if you are abstaining. With time expired, that was a roller coaster, folks. That was a roller coaster ride of emotion. The yeses are 12, the noes are 11, the abstentions are 4. The motion carries. We will delete the phrase non-dual graduate degree. Are there any further motions on Article 4? Vienna.
Yes, this is really just mostly a point of clarification. I want to make sure I understand this. For 4.3b, the Assembly shall consider, oh yeah, let's make sure I'm reading from the right version. Okay. The Assembly shall consider and take appropriate action by a 2/3 majority vote of its total present and voting membership. I just want a clarification on whether that means something doesn't happen or pass, or the action doesn't happen without a 2/3 majority yes, or that means that we need a 2/3 majority vote. Like, I don't know, I've had trouble with understanding that. Maybe someone can explain.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, so I just found myself a little bit confused about 4.3b. Can someone maybe just explain in slightly different language what exactly this is intending? And then either if everyone understands it, great, or if it needs to be slightly changed, then maybe we do that.
So as I read it, it does appear to require a 2/3 majority for actions that the Assembly wants to take. Unless anyone else, Annie Rappaport.
So that was the intent, that there not be split votes by one vote, but it's overridden by other places, either in the bylaws or in the way that the chair just conducts the meeting, where there are places where we allow a simple majority. Some people may remember in the past, we used to have these Robert's Rules cards that we would put out on the table, which would actually tell you which kinds of votes needed simple majority versus a 2/3 majority. And things like amending the bylaws separately have their own vote requirements. So this would not allow actions by a simple majority, but as I said, we have other places where that's different.
That makes sense to me. I'm not sure that it's correct that the bylaws can overrule the Constitution.
Well,
so
I mean,
we may
so the
want to
Constitution
change.
has things also like 4.3e.
Right. Sure.
Assembly by majority vote.
Sure.
Well, that's just initiate impeachment proceedings. And so I think actually I would recommend we amend 4.3b and strike the words said read, the Assembly shall consider and take appropriate action by a majority vote of its total present and voting members, because that seems to be consistent with how we have used it currently.
So you cut out for just a second there. I just want to clarify that you want to strike the words 2/3.
That is correct.
Okay. Annie, did you have something to add on that? Nope. She got rid of her coffee cup.
Alex
Valerie,
said everything.
Valerie, did you have something to add? Valerie.
Sorry, I had to figure out how to unmute.
No problem.
No, I don't. I had some questions about how it reads, but if it's changed to a majority, that clarifies it for me. Thanks.
Okay. Emmanuel, is your comment on this or something else?
Something else.
Okay. Laura.
My comments on this,
Okay.
Laura McBride, chemistry. Is there anything that we vote on that requires a 2/3 majority that we normally like do a 2/3 majority for, or have we always just done a regular majority?
Any bylaws changes, the only places, there are a few places where we don't require almost everything we do does require 2/3. The few places we specifically say that we don't, there's something related to the GLAO budget, I believe, which does not say 2/3 majority. And special elections where there's a tie and the assembly has a vote, then that also just says simple majority.
So I guess my question is how this is worded right now when we're voting to make changes to this constitution. Right now, do we have to have a 2/3 majority to make the change?
What an excellent question you have asked.
So
I feel like we've just been operating on simple majority.
It's explicitly in 8.2.3. No, sorry, 8.2.2.
What's explicitly in 8.2?
The amendments to the Constitution must be approved by 2/3 majority of the Assembly's total and present voting membership.
So that is true. My take would be that right now we're not actually voting on official changes yet. The
Right.
official vote comes at the end when these are all amendments that we create. So it's
And that's what you said at the very beginning of the
right.
meeting.
Right. So it's kind of like Congress meets as a committee of the whole sometimes, which is fun for congressional scholars if you're interested. But other than that, you don't have to worry about it. So right now we're essentially meeting as a committee of the whole, and then we will vote as an assembly.
Because I think Vienna brought up a great point here is, so from how this is currently worded, anything we do has to be by 2/3 majority, but we've just have not been following that.
So does that technically mean the vote that passed 12-11 is now invalid because that would
No,
not meet
because
this requirement?
amendments are not actions of the Assembly. They're parliamentary procedure.
Could you define actions of the assembly?
That would be something that the Constitution probably should do. I know there are Robert's Rules definitions that I don't have memorized off the top of my head. But yeah,
That's why
we
have a chair of the meeting and a parliamentarian.
Right.
Because I like the idea of changing it to majority. I was just wondering, do we need to specify anything besides amendments to the Constitution that we would want to be 2/3? Like voting on acts, resolutions. I don't know if there's anything besides the amendment that we would want to be 2/3, because it seems like this was written to specify that or to like have it be that way, but we just haven't been doing that.
So what is true is that the bylaws cannot supersede the Constitution, but they could require something over and above what the Constitution requires. So if we want anything to be 2/3 specifically, obviously if it's an amendment that should be specified in the Constitution, but anything that we want above a majority can be specified in the bylaws.
And is specified in a lot of different places. Like
Correct.
if you search bylaws for majority, it says it in a whole bunch of different places.
Correct. Viana?
Yeah, two things. So I guess on that specific point, then perhaps are we wanting to change this to not say 2/3, and it makes sense to then introduce 2/3 into the bylaws for certain things? That's one thing. I think I realized that the word total, I think, was what was confusing me. Total and present. I was thinking between like, are we just needing 2/3 of the people who are present versus 2/3 of like our total members? So I don't know if it's neater and still clear enough to just strike the word total, or if we feel like we still need that.
I'd be in favor.
Okay, so we have then we have two motions on the floor unless anyone else has any further comments on this. Seeing none. So the first motion is to strike the words 2/3 from 4.3.b. Do I have a second?
Second.
It is seconded. You can't second it, Alec. It was your motion.
Oh, right. Sorry. Oops. Sorry.
So yes is to remove the words 2/3. No is to keep the words 2/3. Voting begins now. As time expires, the votes are yes 21 and abstain 4. With that, the motion obviously carries. We will delete the term 2/3. The second motion is to delete the word total in order to clarify the present and voting membership. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
It is so seconded. Yes is to remove the word total. No is to keep the word total in. Voting begins now. With time expiring, the yeas are 23, the nays are 0, and the abstentions are 3. The motion carries. I'm going to go to Emmanuel, who has been waiting to make his change for several minutes now.
Okay, so the first one is a point of information or clarification. If you could scroll to 4.1.A.4. Thank you there. Okay, thank you. So I realized that first here the word bylaws has been spelled with a lowercase b. So for consistency, do we want to start the B with uppercase or lowercase? That's the first amendment.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to capitalize B in bylaws. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any objection? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and do that. Your second one, Emmanuel?
So the second one is the last part to that article that says this proxy is an unauthorized alternate that is considered a legitimate member of the GSG General Assembly and has all the rights and privileges therein. I feel that by virtue that we have said that it's a proxy, that means that person is already an alternative. So I thought maybe using the word alternate is a little bit redundant. And I'm proposing to change that phrase to read like, this proxy shall be considered as an authorized and legitimate member of the GSG General Assembly and shall incur all rights and privileges therein. I have posted in the chat.
Excellent.
Seconded.
Okay, we have the motion. It is seconded. Do I hear any objections? I do not. The motion is agreed to. Yehuda.
So 4.3.4 or D, I guess it would be in there, or these are out of order anyway. The assembly shall form and dispense of standing ad hoc committees as it used to say it deems necessary, and now it says it's outlined in the bylaws. And I would like to motion to change it back. Sometimes when we have, we create ad hoc committees for the purpose of looking at specific legislation. Like, for example, I think we had the parent accommodation thing, which we created an ad hoc committee for. And if we require that all ad hoc committees are mentioned in the bylaws, we wouldn't be able to do that. So I would motion to change it back, and also that there's a typo where it should be standing and ad hoc committees.
Alec, you have a point on this?
Yeah, perhaps it wasn't quite clear. What we say is shall form and disband standing ad hoc committees as outlined in the bylaws. All we're saying is the rules for how those special committees could be created is clarified in the bylaws. We aren't saying that you can't create any committee that's not specifically spelled out in the bylaws. Maybe that's just a lack of clarity.
So then, following the previous discussion that we had, I'd like to just motion to remove it.
Okay, let's
The
get some other
assembly
people.
shall form and disband standing and ad hoc committees.
Standing and ad hoc committees. Okay, let's get some other people. Rachel Lamb.
Sorry, actually, after you resolve this, I have a.
Oh, okay, that's on something else. Okay, are there any other comments on this issue? Viana, is yours on a different?
Yeah, mine is something else.
Okay, cool. Okay, so the motion is to, I lost it on the screen, but the motion is to delete the phrase outlined in the bylaws, as well as add the word "and" between standing and ad hoc.
And remove the word "such," because then it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so remove the word "such," add the word and delete the phrase outlined in the bylaws. Okay.
It's in the chat.
So it is to change 4.3.4 to what Yehuda has put in the chat. Rachel has helpfully clarified what is yes and what is no. We're gonna see if this works. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Are there any objections? Seeing none, we'll just accept those changes without an official vote. Next, I saw Viana.
Yes, back to, what was that, 4.1A4? Can you scroll up to that? Yes, right there, yeah. Just a request to make the change as Emmanuel had suggested. I think an extra A has been added before legitimate. Should just read and legitimate member. Yeah. And then in addition to that, I would put forward a motion to add a phrase like during the meeting during the meeting for which the proxy is present at the end of that sentence, just so there's no possibility of reading this as once you've been a proxy, you now henceforth have all these powers. I can type in my suggestion to the chat.
That would be great.
Okay.
Does anyone have any comments on that before we move forward? The motion, well, let's wait for it to be typed in so that we have an official motion, and then. All right, we have the motion to add during the assembly for which the proxy is present. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second.
It has been so seconded. Any objections? Hearing none, we will agree to the change. Rachel.
Yeah, so Q and I were just talking about this. Regarding 4.3.b, I believe there was an error when the Constitution was retyped up before it was sent to you. So I'd like to put in the chat actually what the original Constitution said, because I think it might help clarify what happened. So the 2/3 line item actually originally read, the assembly may override a presidential veto on any action by a 2/3 majority, etc. And then 4.3. Oh, I'm sorry, I meant to put B, not D. I apologize. 4.3.B is the assembly shall consider and take appropriate action in all matters submitted by any graduate student. So actually, since this was the version that was sent to you, perhaps we should discuss again. I'm sorry. So what it should, so I don't think we made any changes to that. So what it should have read was 4.3.B, the assembly shall consider and take appropriate action on all matters submitted by any graduate student. And then 4.3.C is the assembly may override a presidential veto on any action by a 2/3 majority vote of its total present and voting membership. So I'm sorry about that. I wanted to flag that because it would help make sense of why we're like, why have we had to be voting by 2/3? Actually, that was not the case. It was just explicitly highlighting 2/3 for presidential veto. So maybe Simon, we could propose a way forward here that might help clarify.
Sure. So the easiest way is, since it wasn't in the one that was sent out, we'll just motion to add the one about presidential vetoes back in and go with that. Yehuda, you have a...
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The other vote could even be just void because it was a mistake.
Yeah. Q, you have...
Yeah, no, I think it's fine. I just want to say there was something between B and C that we should add. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take a quick vote on adding back in 4.3.C from the old Constitution, which is in the chat that Rachel posted. The assembly may override a presidential veto on any action by a 2/3 majority vote of its total president voting membership, and allow our scribe to renumber and letter all of the things that will have to be as we add this clause in. So do I hear a second? Yes.
I have a point of information. So we're just adding this in. We're not taking out
the
4.3B that we amended.
Yeah, that's
okay.
We can leave that in. We can take it out later if we want.
So I'd like to suggest that we make the amendment to reinsert the original language as it was, because then we could just say, you know, we made a mistake and we don't have to worry. We don't have to go through the whole debate again.
Yeah, actually, that makes a lot of sense because the word shall is pretty strong in 4.3b, and so it might prevent us from doing things by 2/3. So yeah, so what we're going to go ahead and do is replace the current 4.3b with the original language on overriding a presidential veto, and the bylaws will set majority thresholds for all other votes.
Second.
Open to questions on that, since that's a pretty complicated switcheroo that we're doing. So if there are no questions, we have a second, unless Viana, is that a question?
Yes, if we do add back in 4.3c, shall we still get rid of the word total?
Sure, the motion will be to add back in 4.3c except without the word total.
Still second that.
All right, we have a second. Are there any objections? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and replace 4.3b with the original language of 4.3c, except for the word total. Yehuda, is that another issue?
So I want to just stick a pin here to say I have an amendment to Article 8, and please remember this issue and debate when we get there.
Okay, we're remembering Article 8 and this issue when we get there. Okay, Sarah.
In 4.3c, just underneath what's being edited right now, is there an extra and? The assembly shall form and disband and standing ad hoc committees?
The and is just in the wrong spot. We voted to add an and between standing and ad hoc, and our intrepid recorder is trying to keep us on the correct page and make all of our changes at the same time. So
excellent. Yes, no criticism, just wanted to say something.
So yeah, we shall make sure that that is in the correct spot. Rachel?
Sorry, I actually meant to coffee myself.
Gotcha, no problem. Any other comments on Article 4? Proposed amendments. Going once, going twice. Seeing none, we will move on to Article 5. So Ashley, I think we actually deleted what you now have as 4.3c was our official move. So yeah, it just doesn't need to be there anymore. Thank you.
Well, on that point, Simon, did you want to keep the language that says the assembly shall consider and take appropriate action on all matters submitted by any graduate student? That was the original 4.3.b, which got muddled with the majority vote thing.
I actually don't want to do that because the word, I mean, this is my own opinion, so the assembly is totally welcome to override. But the word shall means that we would have to consider anything that a graduate student brings to us and then make a decision by majority vote. The bylaws can set our
the original 4.3b doesn't say majority vote. If you look in the chat, I thought the motion was to copy and paste what's in the chat back into the Constitution, with the exception of the word total.
And I think it was also to remove what we had misplaced in here.
I think there's probably two steps. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to go through 4.3 point by point so that everybody is good with exactly what we've got there. 4.3.b should read, the assembly may override a presidential veto on any action by 2/3 majority of its vote, 2/3 majority vote of its present and voting membership.
That's supposed to be C.
Okay, we can have that be C instead.
Right.
Okay, so then 4.3.b should read, the assembly shall consider and take appropriate action on all matters submitted by any graduate student, as is currently in the chat. We're gonna put these changes on the screen and then we'll vote on 4.3 overall as a unit.
Can we add the numbering since we're going through
Yep.
that?
Yep.
There's a missing number.
Yeah, we're making the changes. So 4.3.b should say what 4.3.b says in the chat, Ashley, from Rachel. Perfect, and then we can get rid of the rest of that because that was a mistake. A, B, C, D, E.
Well, it should be A, B, C, D, E, F.
Yeah, okay, and then what we have under C right now should be D, then 4.3D should be E, and so on and so forth. Okay. So the motion is to accept 4.3 as it currently looks on your screen. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded. Are there any objections?
Objection.
Okay.
To the issue of 4.3D and whether we're doing this, for the moment, it doesn't give any guidance. It just says shall form and disband. Perhaps it is wise to either put in deems necessary or, according to the bylaws, some sort of ruling there as opposed to just leaving it as is.
Okay. So the motion is to add.
So if we went back to, I'm sorry, I can't remember the article number, but earlier we voted on whether we wanted the bylaws to be the guidance for something, and I believe we did say yes to that.
So there are sort of two options there. One is to say as outlined in the bylaws. One is to say as deemed necessary, or as it deems necessary. Either one. So if you have a preference, you can motion to put one of those in.
I'd be interested in hearing from some other people.
We voted to take out as outlined in the bylaws.
Okay.
So if you wanted to put it in, you could add something like following a procedure outlined in the bylaws to clarify it. But that was the whole reason we took it out.
All right.
But
so
if you look at the next one at E, it doesn't mention a procedure, right? The Constitution is assumed to follow procedures mentioned in the bylaws.
Okay, so do we have a motion to add something to the end of 4.3.d? Something either as deemed necessary or anybody want to give specific language that we want at the end there? No? Okay, then we're voting on 4.3 overall, such that it should read as it currently reads on your screen. Okay, I'm going to give 30 seconds to vote on this one. Yes is to accept it as it looks on your screen. No is to have it not say that.
To accept it in like the committee of the whole, as you sort of mentioned.
Right.
To later vote on the whole thing.
Yep. All right, at the end of the time to vote, the votes are 17 yes, 1 no, and 1 abstention. So 4.3 is agreed to as is. Any other comments on 4.3 or on 4 overall? Okay. We are approaching the end of our official time, so I'm going to motion to extend our time indefinitely.
Second.
Yehuda has seconded. Are there any objections? Seeing none, the time is extended. We will move on to Article 5, the standing committees. Any amendments to Article 5? Going once. Going twice. None. Article 6. This one seems like it's going to be very controversial. Any amendments to Article 6? Mr. Yehuda Katz.
So I would motion to say the GSG shall have a faculty or staff advisor selected in coordination with STAMP and or the graduate school. Because, and the reason behind that is, number one, that gives it a little more legitimacy, like, because the point of having an advisor is to have someone who's connected to what you actually do. So the way it's written right now, we could select like absolutely anyone. And then also, what if for some reason they don't want it to be an employee? Like they decide that, you know, what if it's a professor emeritus who isn't technically an employee or something to that effect, who would be an appropriate advisor? So that's my rationale for suggesting the change.
Okay, so your change would be the GSG shall have a faculty or staff advisor selected by the GSG in consultation with the graduate school?
And the STAMP.
Graduate school. Rachel, you want to give a comment on that?
Yeah, two comments. One comment is in the bylaws, we explicitly made reference to both STAMP and the graduate school, because we do acknowledge that that's the, like, those are the two people, the two institutions or groups on campus with which we want to maintain connectivity. So this just removed the explicit name of the advisor, made it more general. And the other thing is that the language now matches the language that SORC requires all student organizations. Like when they talk about who is eligible for an advisor, this language matches how they articulate who is eligible for an advisor. So they say it can be any faculty or staff person who is currently employed by the University of Maryland. That's how they articulate eligibility. So just to give some context for intent, it wasn't to, yes, according to the Constitution, if you had no other guidance, it does mean you could pick absolutely anyone, yes. But the bylaws explicitly mentions STAMP and the graduate school. I think we said every effort, something like our proposal was every effort shall be made to identify a staff or faculty advisor from both the graduate school and STAMP, or something like that. I can't remember the specific language off the top of my head, but.
All right, so I'd like to withdraw my motion and change it to something new. Rather than say employed by the university, I would say the GSG shall select at least one faculty or staff advisor who meets the requirement for the advisor to student groups set by the university.
GSG shall select at least one faculty or staff advisor who meets the requirements to
set by, who meets the requirements for an advisor set by the university.
For an advisor set by the university. Okay. Any other comments on that as a change before we move to voting on it?
Sorry, my coffee cup is not raised.
Okay. I figured. All right. Seeing no other comments, do I have a second for Yehuda's motion?
Seconded.
Any objections? Seeing none, the change will be adopted. Any other changes to Article 6? Since we just wholly replaced Article 6 by unanimous consent, I can't imagine that there would be, but people have surprised me before. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to Article 7, which appears not to have been changed. Are there any comments, questions, amendments to Article 7 bylaws? Viana.
Yes, my favorite word is there, total. Shall we strike it?
We have a motion to strike the word total from 7.1. Do I have a second?
Can I suggest the motion be to replace all occurrences of total and present voting membership with present and voting membership?
Sure. That is the
Should
new
that come up? Because it
motion. The new motion is anytime the word total appears before present voting membership, we're going to get rid of it.
Second.
We have a second. Any objections? Seeing none, the motion is agreed to. Any other proposed changes to Article 7? Seeing none, we'll move on to Article 8. I know for a fact there's at least one change here. Mr. Yehuda Katz.
This is the third time I've been involved in GSG constitutional amendments and or wholesale rewriting of the Constitution in my time here on the GSG. Not to mention all the times that we've had to amend the bylaws or again, completely wholesale rewrite the bylaws. And every single time we run into issues with inconsistent numbering and also what is the actual official version. So I would motion to add 8.4, the Constitution and bylaws shall be maintained in a standard typesetting format to allow for to allow for better understanding and easier amendment. I could write that.
I'm writing it.
Yeah, because and how exactly would that be different from what is currently done? What would be the change in action desired as a result of that amendment?
So for last year, or was it 2 years ago, we kept the bylaws, this is just an example, typeset as a LaTeX document, which is a structured format where every time you generate it, it always looks the same. So you can't mess up the numbering and you can't mess up the indent. And you also keep a version history so that you can't, look at the wrong version. That would be, the way I would implement it.
Should we perhaps,
as opposed to what we do now, which is someone takes a Word document, converts it to a PDF, then copies and pastes that back to a Word document, and then next time that there are changes, someone will modify the PDF and then take that, you get the idea. And that's how we end up with the crazy indenting and the crazy numbering.
should we perhaps charge the VPLA with maintaining the official version of the Constitution, such that we always have an official version? And I mean, I'm not saying don't have the typesetting or whatever, but we could also charge a particular person.
That's not my motion.
Okay, all right. Well, then we'll debate Yehuda's motion 8.4 as it appears in the chat. Viana or Emmanuel, are your comments on this? Viana's is not.
Mine's not.
Emmanuel? Nope, on something else. Okay. Any other thoughts, Kay Sarah?
Just a question. I mean, someday when Yehuda's not here, are the readers of the Constitution going to understand what standard typesetting format means?
I'm hoping we'll always have enough technical people around. So for example, if we do it the way that the bylaws were done in LaTeX, then we will always have people here who will understand LaTeX, just as an example. So
is this really something appropriate to put in the Constitution versus just general good practice, like best practices?
Well, that's why I mentioned that I wanted people to remember what we had to go through for amending Section 4. It is best practices, but we're not doing it. And part of the amendments to the Constitution and the bylaws are to fix the things that we haven't been doing. And sometimes we put in new things and then decide that they weren't appropriate and we change them after. And based on my extensive experience in being involved in the governance specifically of GSG, I think it's appropriate.
Melanie?
Yeah, I think I kind of second that question about I'm not sure that this is something that necessarily needs to be in the Constitution specifically, even for reasons that if we're going to talk about kind of keeping everything stable, there may be a time at which the way in which you format it changes, and it feels like it kind of adds more layers that may not be necessary for the Constitution, but may be a good idea to generally have the Constitution well done. Does that make sense?
Yes. So the main reason to put it in the Constitution rather than just do it is so that anyone who wants to make amendments in the future will read in the document that that's how it's done. Rather than try to take the PDF and edit the PDF, for example. Because I do see in the future that this is going to continue to be distributed as a PDF, and someone's going to want to make an amendment and they're going to do this copy and paste thing into Word.
Annie Rappaport.
I would just like to second a concern that I don't think it's a given that we'll always have people familiar with the tech, or that the people familiar with the tech are going to be able to help. I will cite one example. I think we're taking something from something that was trying to do something standard. Not knowing all the technical terms, I apologize, but it was in trying to get an editable format of the most recent bylaws. It wasn't until we were kind of but a couple weeks into our committee that we realized when we asked for that most updated bylaws that came to us in a standard quote unquote way, that they were older than the most updated ones that we ended up using. So it actually made us backtrack. So my concern there is, again, how do we keep intelligence shared? How do we keep things so many people can do that and not just be specialized individuals that we're counting on in GSG?
I mean, that works the same way. If you codify the way to keep the bylaws, then you don't run into that problem either.
Right, but there might not always be someone comfortable with LaTeX who's willing to take the time to do all of this.
That's why I wouldn't say that it should be done in LaTeX. That's why I'm just saying it should be done in a standard way. And once you say that there's a standard way, then people should be able to find that standard way.
Deanna, I can't tell if you're raised your hand for this issue.
This is related to this.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, hearing these comments, I like the intent behind this, but I think we should maybe leave it as saying something like either a standard format or a standard way of maintaining and editing these documents, with the intent of keeping them well organized. But I would like to stay away from specifics as much as possible.
So to clarify, would that mean striking the word typesetting? It seems like that was the more substantial change, because it should be because you said it in a standard format to allow for better understanding. I'm just trying to understand your suggested amendment.
Yeah, even format may be too strict. So maybe just a standard way.
I mean, I'm not sure then if you take it out, I'm not sure how that addresses the issue of just lines going missing without track changes like we had in Article 4.
And there may not be a way to make this standard for years and years out from now. That may just be the issue that we're coming up against.
Alec.
Motion to end debate on this particular item and hold a vote.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any objection? Seeing no objection, we will hold a vote on the addition of 8.4 as it appears in the chat, unless there are typos in it, which I typed it, so there probably are. So yes is to add Article 8.4 as it appears in the chat. No is to not add it and leave. Well, there is no Article 8.4, so not add or add. So yes is to add, no is to not add. 30 seconds of voting time. With time expired, the vote is 7 in favor, opposed, and abstaining is not.
I don't know if it's me or you, but I didn't hear the numbers.
Yeah, you cut out entirely.
Oh, I was playing with the on-off on my mic, so that would be why. The vote was 7 in favor, 8 opposed, and 3 abstaining. The motion is not agreed to.
Now it's a different number.
It is now a different number, but that was the number when the time expired.
That's fine.
So, yeah, and the other number was 8 to 8, which would also not be enough to agree to it.
Are you assuming, just a point of information, are you assuming that anyone who doesn't formally abstain is implicitly abstaining? That's how we're maintaining quorum here?
That's the assumption.
I'm saying if it was 8 to 8, but one of those was the chair's vote.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a weird position where I'm the chair, but like I'm also, yeah. So I agree. I'm in a weird spot here. But anyway.
This is where that parliamentary, I appeal the decision of the chair thing comes in, but I'm not going to start.
All right. Any other changes to Article 8? Viana.
Okay, yes, to my original thing. Much simpler, I think. Actually, just 2 things. One is Article 8.1. If we can scroll to that. Shall be valid only in the event that at least 1/20th of the graduate student body, is that supposed to be votes? Okay,
yeah.
Yes, so I propose a motion to add the word votes to the end of that
So
sentence.
if we view the track changes, it's actually still there. So the PDF copy that was sent out has it. I think it's just a typo that it was removed.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll just, the motion is to add the word votes. Do I have a second?
Well, votes in said elections, which is what the original text is.
Yeah.
Okay, so we want it to be votes in said elections or just votes?
Sure.
Votes in said elections, singular, I believe.
Okay.
I put in the chat what the 2015 Constitution said, just so you have a reference.
So votes in said elections added to the end of 8.1. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any objections? Hearing none, the motion is agreed to. Other amendments.
One more thing, just because I'm seeing it in 8.2c, I'm just seeing again total and present voting membership, so we can go ahead per our vote.
We don't need to vote on that. Yes, indeed.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Any
Also
other
in
changes?
Last line on the word. Last word on the line.
In C, 8.2c.
In 8.2c, okay.
First sentence, last word on the line. Last word, the typographical line.
Yeah, there's
Should
two
amendments
actually.
not? Oh, maybe there's a lot. It shows up a lot. Okay,
there's
there we
a couple.
go. Yeah.
Well, no, that one's total membership. Leave that one. No, the top one's good.
Yeah,
the one that you were about to change, leave.
Yep, that one leave. Yeah.
Yeah. Second one was left.
Perfect. Thank you, Ashley.
Actually, sorry, that one is not correct. The second one specifically because it says at least 1/20th of the GSG's total membership. In line with our earlier change of defining what membership should be, that should instead read 1/20th of the graduate student body.
Okay.
There's a few places in there that need that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's hold one vote to allow Miss Annie Rappaport. Yes.
I am so sorry to be the messenger of bad news. We have just fallen below quorum. We no longer have quorum at our assembly.
Excellent. You'll love to see it. So anybody who has friends, text them and ask them to just come sign in for a little while. Since this is not the official final vote, we can continue editing. We're going to need a full quorum when we want to take the final vote. So anybody you know.
We've operated in the past on if the quorum was there and left, that we don't ask questions and we just keep going. And
I don't think we've always done that, Yehuda.
Yes, we have.
Yes,
we have.
Not being true. How
I have
could it
recalled
be?
examples of both.
Even if that is true, I feel like the amendments to the Constitution may be a step too far for us to just
Well,
go
the
the other
point
way.
of having the point of having the quorum is so that you know that you're representing the will of everyone, and they were all here, and they all definitely had time to say anything. Now we're just in, getting in the technical weeds of the Constitution, so they obviously all approved. So
Let's keep our fingers crossed that
I'm okay with
somebody
going
shows back.
on.
I'll start trying getting people to come back on if anyone else wants to join me.
And in the meantime, we'll finish out the last little few.
We're going to keep the technical editing and
trying.
hope that we can get enough people by the time we need to take the final vote.
Yep.
Yeah, let's try to get the vote soon. Let's try to get people back and go, because I'm sure people had to leave because it's just we're going over time. So let's just try to keep moving.
So let's make one vote allowing the replacement of GSG's total membership with graduate student body anywhere appropriate in the Constitution as deemed by the Constitution Review Committee. Unless anybody has an objection to that being the process.
Seconded.
All right. Any objections? Q, you have a...
I have points of information about I just want to say that tell your friends that if we don't do it today, we really can't do our elections. So please come back. That's the only thing I want to say. Thank you.
Yes. Any objection to allowing the Constitution Review Committee to replace GSG's total membership with graduate student body anywhere appropriate? Seeing none, we will continue on. Any other amendments to Article 8? Seeing none, we'll move on to Article 9. Dealing with appeals. Any proposed amendments to Article 9? Seeing none. Oh, okay, Sarah. Oh, you're muted, okay, Sarah. I've unmuted you.
All right, yes. In 9.1, should it say at least 1% of the graduate student body?
Yes.
Yes, it should, and that is what Laura McBride sent to me earlier, and I forgot to let people know. So we have an amendment to add the word "the" before graduate student body. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any objections? Seeing none, the motion is agreed to.
I have a crazy motion, which is to allow whoever finally typesets this document to make all necessary typographic corrections.
A motion to allow the Constitution Review Committee to make typographical changes, assuming they do not change the meaning of any part of the Constitution. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any objection? Seeing no objections, the motion is agreed to. And we are ready to vote overall on the Constitution. If we can get one more person to sign on.
Allison Q just said she's going to call back in. Is that? And Gonzalez coming.
So.
And then TLPL as well, it seems. What's the number of participants we need?
26. And we had dropped down to 23.
What? I see 37.
Not all of those are voting
37
members.
total participants. Execs don't count, advisors don't count, and Diamondback doesn't count.
Admitting 1. Admitting 2.
Woo!
And we should still need one more, I believe.
Because there are how many non-voting participants in the call? I just want to double check to make sure we aren't there awkwardly just awkwardly waiting for no reason.
I think I count 8 non-rep participants, but I'm gonna double check. Could be more than that.
There's 11.
So that would bring us to 28 present voting members.
Are we good?
We're good. Yes. All right.
Cool.
This is the big kahuna that you've all been waiting for. This is the vote to recommend the Constitution as we have just edited it to the entire graduate student body for referendum. I'm going to leave 1 minute to vote. Yes is we should approve this Constitution to the referendum. No is we should not approve this Constitution to the referendum.
Point of clarification, we need 2/3. Yeah, Simon?
Yes, we need 2/3. And we need 2/3 of the present and voting, so.
So maybe if you're on the phone, you could voice vote.
Yeah.
Well, if they don't vote, they don't count. Meaning they count for quorum, but they don't count for the 2/3.
Yeah, I agree with Yehuda's interpretation.
Yep, you're right.
And
Doesn't
we're
matter.
Present and voting, not just
We
present.
get it.
Yeah, we're gonna get it anyway.
Yeah, it's over 20 already.
Assuming
so.
nobody removes their votes in the next 12 seconds. And the time to vote has expired. The yeas are 22, the nays are 0, the abstentions are 0. The Constitution is agreed to. Congratulations, everybody. You are now framers of the new GSG Constitution. You are the founding fathers. Congratulations. All right, with that, the only thing that we were authorized to do by the call to special session has been completed. So I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. We have ourselves a
Second.
Constitution.
Any objections?
I have an objection.
Seeing none.
Hey. Who is responsible now for making sure that this is typeset properly before the general election?
The Constitution Review Committee will designate someone, I guess.
It's been a joint effort. I assume it still will be. The Constitution Committee is meeting for 2.5 to 3 hours tomorrow morning to make sure just what you're suggesting is correct. It's also meeting tomorrow morning so that we can get everything to rules tomorrow for bylaws, so that bylaws reflect this Constitution. So just so you all know, yeah.
Excellent.
Objection withdrawn.
Objection withdrawn. Seeing no objections, the meeting is adjourned.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you, everybody.
Thank you. Hey, and just quick
Hi,
check
everyone.
for you and
Thanks.
I. When should I expect the final version? Just so I'm on email and kind of ready to get it sent along.
I would say, it's a good question, Nate. I would say by no later than 8 tomorrow morning.
Oh, wow. Okay, great.
Mhm.
Wonderful. Okay.